The Sapphire Express was the pride of Europe, a gleaming midnight blue locomotive that roared from Paris to Constantinople, carrying diplomats, aristocrats, and secrets wrapped in silk. But on a storm-lit evening in March, as the train thundered through the French countryside, one passenger failed to rise for breakfast. His compartment was locked from within, his gold cufflinks missing, and a faint trace of jasmine hung in the air where no perfume should have been. Hercule Poirot, bound for Vienna on a holiday he had promised himself for years, looked up from his seat with a sigh that was half amusement, half inevitability. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "even the fastest train cannot outrun murder." Chapter 1. The Last Passenger at Gare de Lyon. The platform at Gare de Lyon glimmered beneath the lamps of a Parisian evening, alive with steam, chatter, and the shrill cries of porters loading luggage into the waiting carriages. The Sapphire Express stood ready, long, sleek, and magnificent, its polished blue sides reflecting the light like a dark mirror. It was the newest of Europe's grand trains, built for speed, privacy, and elegance, promising its passengers a swift journey across the continent to Vienna and onward to Constantinople. Hercule Poirot stood upon the platform, immaculate as ever. His grey suit was pressed to perfection, his shoes gleamed like obsidian, and his moustache, waxed to mathematical symmetry, glistened in the lamplight. Beside him, a small valise rested neatly at his feet. To the casual observer, he might have been a man of leisure preparing for a pleasant journey. But to those who knew him, there was always that faint air of alertness, of a mind too precise to ever truly rest. "Ah, Hastings," he said, glancing at his companion, "observe the theatre of travel. So many faces, so many stories about to collide. Comme toujours, the perfect setting for drama." Hastings laughed as he adjusted his hat. "You don't honestly expect a murder on every train you board, do you, Poirot?" Poirot gave a small smile. "One must never expect it, mon ami. Merely be ready when it comes." They boarded the train with the rest of the passengers, greeted by the steward in a crisp blue uniform. Inside, the carriages gleamed with mahogany panelling, brass fixtures, and plush velvet seats. The air carried the faint scent of cigars and expensive perfume. Poirot nodded approvingly. "Cleanliness, order, refinement, magnifique. I begin to feel at peace." But even as he spoke, his sharp eyes swept the compartment with quiet curiosity. He noted the passengers as one might study a chessboard before the first move. There was Lady Margaret Whitcomb, an English widow of striking poise, wrapped in furs and mystery. Opposite her, a young Russian woman sat reading a leather-bound novel, gloved hands trembling slightly as though the words unsettled her. A German industrialist barked orders to his valet. An American journalist scribbled in his notebook with restless energy, and at the far end, a man with a scar across his cheek stared silently out the window, his reflection fragmented by the rain. Poirot and Hastings took their seats in the dining car, just as the train lurched forward. The whistle sounded long and mournful, and Paris began to slide away behind them. The Sapphire Express gathered speed, plunging into the night. Dinner was served, a lavish affair of consommé, trout, and fine wine. Poirot dined with modest appetite, speaking little but observing much. Hastings, meanwhile, found himself in conversation with the American, who introduced himself as Mr. Charles Redding, correspondent for the New York Herald. "Traveling east for a story," Redding said with a grin. "Word is the Balkans are stirring again. Politics, espionage, assassinations, Europe's a powder keg, and I'm chasing the spark." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "Let us hope your spark does not light too close to our train." Across the table, Lady Whitcomb smiled faintly. "I rather like a touch of danger," she said, her voice cool and musical. "It keeps one awake." Poirot inclined his head politely. "Madame, you will find that danger seldom asks permission to disturb one's sleep." Later, as the passengers retired to their compartments, Poirot and Hastings lingered in the corridor, listening to the rhythmic hum of wheels on rails. A fascinating collection of travellers, Poirot mused. A widow, a journalist, a soldier perhaps, a frightened young lady, and a man with the eyes of one who remembers too much. I wonder, Hastings, what fate seats such people together? Coincidence, surely, Hastings said. Poirot smiled faintly. Coincidence, mon ami, is merely the disguise worn by inevitability. They retired to their own compartment, the sound of rain mingling with the steady pulse of the train. Poirot sat by the window, notebook in hand, scribbling a few observations before bed. Order is the key to peace, he murmured. And yet, when man is at peace, he becomes careless. That is when chaos knocks. At precisely midnight, the Sapphire Express crossed the border into eastern France. The train slowed slightly as it climbed a curve along a wooded ridge. Poirot had just extinguished his lamp when a faint noise caught his attention. A soft thud, then a muffled cry, quickly stifled. He sat upright, every sense alert. "Hastings," he whispered. "You hear it?" Hastings stirred sleepily. "Hear what?" Poirot rose and opened the compartment door, peering down the dimly lit corridor. Nothing, only the faint sway of the carriage and the hiss of steam. Then, from 2 doors down, came the unmistakable sound of something metallic falling to the floor. Moments later, the train gave a sudden jolt. Poirot steadied himself, frowning. "Mon ami," he said softly, "I believe someone on this train has just departed, but not by choice." He straightened his tie, eyes glinting with quiet excitement. It begins. Chapter 2. Death in Compartment. Number 9, the Sapphire Express raced through the night, a sleek serpent of steel cutting across the dark French countryside. Inside, the corridors were hushed. Only the steady pulse of the wheels and the faint murmur of sleepers disturbed the silence. But Hercule Poirot was wide awake. He stood in the narrow passageway, his dressing gown immaculate, a small lantern in hand. "You heard the cry, Hastings," he said softly. A sound of fear, quick, suppressed. "I never mistake such a tone." Hastings, still half drowsy, followed with reluctant obedience. "Well, whoever it was seems quiet enough now. Maybe just a nightmare." Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. Nightmares do not drop metal objects." They stopped outside compartment number 9. The door was closed, but a thin line of light glowed beneath it. Poirot knocked delicately. "Pardon, monsieur, is all well?" No answer. He tried again, a little louder. Still nothing. Then, with a glance to Hastings, he turned the handle. Locked. "Interesting," Poirot murmured. "And yet light burns within. We must fetch the conductor." Within moments, the night steward arrived, Monsieur Leclerc, a tall man with nervous eyes and a silver keychain. "A disturbance, monsieur?" Poirot gestured. "In number 9, the passenger does not respond," the steward nodded, inserting the master key. The lock clicked, and the door swung inward. A rush of perfume, subtle, expensive, with a hint of jasmine, filled the air. The compartment was neat, almost too neat. The small table held a half-empty glass of brandy, a newspaper folded precisely, and a gold cigarette case. Upon the bunk lay a man in evening dress, his face turned toward the wall. Poirot stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "He's very still," he said quietly. Leclerc touched the man's shoulder, then recoiled. "Mon Dieu, he's cold!" The body was indeed lifeless. A single wound marred the stillness, a thin crimson line just below the left ear, almost surgical in its precision. There was no blood on the sheets, no sign of struggle. Only on the carpet near the bed, a small glint of metal, a cuff-link in the shape of a sapphire drop. Its twin was missing. Hastings swallowed. Good heavens, Poirot! He's been murdered!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Mais oui, Hastings. And in a locked compartment, no less." "Voilà, we are not merely passengers now. We are custodians of mystery." Leclerc stood trembling. But how, monsieur? The door was locked from within. The window, you see, it cannot open more than an inch. Poirot inspected the latch. So it appears, he murmured. Yet appearances, mon ami, are but courteous deceivers. There is always a way when reason demands one. He bent over the body, studying every detail. The victim was in his 50s, his hair silver at the temples, his features distinguished yet hard. His hands were manicured, his clothes impeccable, save for one sleeve, slightly rumpled, as though grasped in a final moment of resistance. Poirot noted the faint scent of tobacco not belonging to the dead man's own brand, and a tiny smear of red wax on the cuff of his jacket. Curious, he said softly. Wax, perhaps from a seal, or a candle used where no light should have been. Hastings watched uneasily. You don't think someone's still on the train? Poirot smiled faintly. Oh, mon ami, I am certain of it. Murderers, unlike their victims, seldom leave promptly. He turned to Leclerc. Who occupied this compartment? Monsieur Émile Reynard, the steward said, a financier from Brussels. He boarded at Calais this evening. Poirot's brows lifted. Reynard? A fox by name, and now one caught in his own trap. The conductor crossed himself. We must inform the police when we reach Strasbourg, monsieur. Yes, Poirot agreed. But until then the killer rides with us. No one must leave their compartments. The doors between the carriages locked them. Leclerc hurried off to obey, leaving Poirot and Hastings alone with the dead man. Poirot examined the small desk beside the bed. The newspaper was dated that very day, but folded inside was a telegram, its message brief. Deliver Sapphire package personally. No delays. M. Hastings frowned. Sapphire package? Perhaps jewellery? Poirot nodded slowly. Perhaps, or something more valuable than jewels. Men are seldom killed for beauty alone, Hastings, only for greed, fear, or silence. He pocketed the telegram carefully, then straightened. See, come. We must meet our fellow passengers. Already they know something is amiss. Indeed, as they entered the corridor, faces appeared from half-opened doors. Lady Whitcomb stood nearest, her eyes wide but composed. What has happened? She asked. Poirot inclined his head politely. A death, madame. One which demands discretion. The American journalist Redding stepped forward. A death? Good Lord, man, do you mean murder? Poirot did not answer directly. The Sapphire Express, it seems, has gained an unwanted passenger, one who kills. Gasps followed, and a ripple of fear passed through the corridor. Poirot raised a calming hand. Ne panique, s'il vous plaît. Until we reach Strasbourg, we remain civilized. The murderer will not escape. Of that, I give you my word. As the passengers returned uneasily to their compartments, Poirot turned to Hastings. Lockroom murder, a vanished weapon, a missing cuff-link, and a letter signed only M. It is elegant, efficient, and wrong in all the right ways. Hastings sighed. So, you're enjoying yourself already? Poirot smiled, that familiar gleam of satisfaction lighting his eyes. But of course, the murderer has chosen a most beautiful stage. And He touched his chest lightly. I am the audience who never applauds until the final act. Outside, thunder rumbled again over the dark countryside, and the Sapphire Express thundered eastward through the rain, carrying within it a secret that would not remain silent for long. Chapter 3. The Lady with the Jasmine Perfume. Morning broke pale and uncertain over the French countryside, but inside the Sapphire Express the air was heavy with unease. The train sped on toward Strasbourg, slicing through fields veiled in mist. The passengers, though dressed and seated for breakfast, whispered in subdued tones, eyes flicking nervously toward the corridor where two uniformed attendants now guarded the locked door of compartment. Number 9 Hercule Poirot entered the dining car with the calm assurance of a man attending a social engagement rather than a murder scene. Every gesture was composed, deliberate. Bon matin, mesdames et messieurs, he said cheerfully. It is a fine day for conversation, is it not? The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Lady Whitcomb set down her cup of tea, her gloved hands trembling slightly. Monsieur Poirot, this is dreadful. The conductor says the gentleman in compartment 9 was murdered. Poirot inclined his head gravely. Alas, madame, that is so. And the murderer, I fear, is among us. A soft gasp passed through the carriage. The American journalist, Charles Redding, leaned forward. You mean one of us? Just so, said Poirot. The doors were locked, the windows secured, and the train has not stopped since Calais. Ergo, the killer enjoys the same fine breakfast as ourselves. The German industrialist, Herr Bauer, bristled. This is preposterous. I demand the train stop at once, and the police be summoned. Ah, mon cher monsieur, Poirot said gently. The police will indeed be waiting at Strasbourg, but the little grey cells, they cannot wait. They demand exercise, he turned to the group. If you please, one at a time, you will each tell me what you observed last night. Lady Whitcomb was the first. Composed yet pale, she spoke softly. I retired shortly before 11. I heard nothing unusual except perhaps the scent. The scent, Poirot repeated. She nodded. A perfume, Monsieur Poirot. I smelled it in the corridor just before midnight. Faint, but unmistakable. Jasmine. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Jasmine, you say? A curious fragrance for a night journey. It lingers. Next came the young Russian woman, Miss Irina Volkov, delicate and pale, her dark hair coiled neatly beneath a simple hat. Her hands trembled as she clutched her handkerchief. I heard a sound too, she stammered in accented English, a voice low, angry. 2 men, I think. Then something dropped. I was frightened. I locked my door, Poirot nodded sympathetically. Très bien. You were wise to be afraid. The American journalist leaned back in his seat. Can't say I heard much, I was writing most of the night. But I did see someone walking past my compartment just after midnight. A woman. She moved quickly, head down. I thought it odd at the time. A woman? Poirot's eyebrows rose. And you noticed nothing of her appearance? Only the perfume, Redding said. Same as Lady Whitcomb described. Jasmine! A faint murmur rippled through the carriage. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back and began to pace slowly between the tables. We have then the scent of jasmine, a woman seen near midnight, and a man dead by morning. C'est intéressant, non? He stopped before Miss Volkov. Tell me, mademoiselle, do you wear perfume? She looked startled. No, monsieur. I do not. Poirot nodded, then turned to Lady Whitcomb. And you, madame? A faint smile curved her lips. Always, Monsieur Poirot, but never jasmine. My fragrance is rose, an English habit. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, yes, and the scent of propriety. He moved on to Herr Bauer, who scowled. Perfume? Nonsense. I sleep early, rise early. This talk of scents and women is foolishness. Poirot's tone sharpened just a fraction. And yet, Herr Bauer, you have not told me what you keep in the small black case beneath your seat. The man's face blanched. My business papers? Of course, said Poirot mildly. But one wonders, when business travels in such secrecy, whether it carries something more volatile than paper. Hastings gave him a questioning glance, but Poirot said no more. Instead, he turned toward the end of the carriage, where a new figure had just entered. A woman in a dark green dress, her veil drawn low. Mademoiselle, Poirot said pleasantly. You were late to breakfast. The woman paused. Her voice, low and composed, carried an accent neither wholly French nor English. Forgive me, Monsieur Poirot. I was unwell. Poirot's eyes drifted toward her wrist. A silk handkerchief was wound tightly around it, as if to hide a bruise, and faintly, very faintly, the scent of jasmine lingered in the air around her. He smiled gently. You have the misfortune, mademoiselle, to wear the perfume of death. Her eyes widened, but Poirot continued before she could speak. Tell me, where were you between 11 and midnight? I was in my compartment, she replied too quickly. I could not sleep. Indeed? And your compartment number? Number 10, she said. Poirot's voice dropped almost to a whisper. The one beside the murdered man. The entire carriage seemed to freeze. The woman's gloved hands clenched upon her handbag. For an instant, her composure faltered. Poirot's tone remained kind, but his eyes were keen as glass. You see, mademoiselle, in murder, as in perfume, the essence is in what lingers, not what is seen. And you, I think, lingered too close to death. Without another word, the woman turned and fled down the corridor, the scent of jasmine trailing behind her like a confession. Hastings rose instinctively. Poirot, shall I go after her? Poirot raised a hand. Non, mon ami.
Let her run.
The guilty flee not because they are wicked, but because they are afraid of what they themselves have done. She will return. They always do. He turned to the window, watching the rain-streaked landscape rush by.
Ah, Hastings, and how fragile is deception.
It takes but one breath of perfume to betray a soul. Outside, the train whistled as it thundered eastward. Somewhere ahead, the border waited. And so did the truth. Chapter 4. The locked telegram by midday. The Sapphire Express cut across the rolling hills of southern Germany, its wheels singing on the rails beneath a pale sky. Inside, the tension that had haunted the train since the night before had not eased. The passengers spoke in whispers, the stewards avoided one another's gaze, and even the breakfast service had lost its charm. Hercule Poirot, however, appeared perfectly serene. He sat in the observation car, sipping coffee from fine porcelain, gazing at the passing countryside with the satisfaction of a man contemplating a chessboard. Hastings joined him moments later, newspaper in hand, and a furrowed brow on his face. "Well, Poirot," he began, "our mysterious lady from compartment 10 has locked herself inside her room. Refuses to answer the conductor or anyone else. Says she's ill." Poirot's moustache twitched.
Ah, yes. Illness, the last refuge of a guilty conscience.
"I have often observed that those who claim weakness have simply found strength in deceit." Hastings frowned. "But what about her perfume, and that bruise on her wrist? You think she's the killer?" Poirot set his cup down with deliberate care. "Non, mon ami. I think she is a witness who believes herself guilty." Before Hastings could respond, the door to the car opened and the train steward, Leclerc, entered, breathless. "Monsieur Poirot."
"I beg you, come quickly."
"We have found something new." Moments later, Poirot and Hastings stood once more inside compartment number 9. The corpse of Monsieur Émile Reynard had been respectfully covered, the air heavy with the scent of lavender oil the attendants had used to mask the lingering perfume of death. But now, on the small table beside the bunk, lay a new discovery. A small silver key and a folded telegram envelope sealed with red wax and stamped confidentiel. Poirot's eyes glimmered.
Ah, the telegram again. I had wondered where it had hidden itself. Leclerc nodded nervously.
"We found it inside a false lining in Monsieur Reynard's suitcase. The lock was broken when we checked for identification." Poirot took the envelope delicately between his fingers. The seal, though cracked, bore a small letter M in ornate script, the same as the telegram he had found the previous night. "So," he murmured, "Monsieur Reynard was indeed carrying something of value, something meant only for M." He slid out the single sheet within. The message was brief, typed in block letters: "Deliver the sapphire by midnight. Trust no one on board. Failure means death." Hastings let out a low whistle.
Good heavens!
So he was smuggling something. A gem, perhaps? Poirot nodded slowly. "The sapphire of the train's name is no coincidence, Hastings. Monsieur Reynard may have carried more than a precious stone, perhaps a document or code named after it. Men have been killed for things far less beautiful." He examined the small key next, finely made, of German silver, its handle engraved with a number. 312. Poirot murmured. "This is no luggage key. It belongs to a safe, or perhaps to a strongbox aboard the train." The steward's face paled. There is a secure safe in the baggage car.
Monsieur, used for valuables during long journeys. Then,
Mon cher Leclerc, Poirot said with a smile, let us take a promenade. They made their way through the corridors, past curious glances and whispered speculation. The baggage car smelled faintly of oil and steel, a contrast to the perfume and luxury of the passenger compartments. Inside stood a heavy brass-bound safe, bolted to the floor. Leclerc produced a ring of keys. We can open it, but the inventory was sealed before departure. If something was added later, Poirot raised a hand. Allow me. He inserted the silver key into the secondary lock. It turned smoothly. A soft click echoed through the chamber. The safe door swung open. Inside lay a small wooden box lined in velvet. Poirot lifted it carefully, setting it upon a crate. The lid bore the same wax seal, a crimson raven stamped with the letter M. Hastings leaned forward.
another raven? What in heaven's name does that mean?
Poirot smiled faintly. It means, mon ami, that this murder was never meant to stay upon a train. It began long before the Sapphire Express left Paris, and it may not end when we arrive in Vienna. He broke the seal. Inside the box lay a magnificent blue gemstone, oval cut, deep as the ocean, gleaming in the dim light. The legendary sapphire of Carpathia, lost for over a decade. Hastings gaped.
Good Lord, that stone's worth a fortune.
Poirot nodded, his voice low. And yet it has cost more than money. Men have died for it. Empires have moved over less. He lifted the gem delicately, turning it so that it caught the light. Beneath it, folded in the velvet lining, was another note, handwritten, elegant, in black ink. To Monsieur Reynard, deliver to Lady W. She alone holds the key to absolution. Poirot's eyes narrowed.
Lady Whitcomb. Hastings looked stunned.
You mean the English widow? But she seemed perfectly respectable. Respectable, Poirot murmured, is a costume easily worn by those accustomed to deception.
Tell me, Hastings, and did you notice her ring?
Hastings frowned, thinking. The large blue one? Yes, rather striking, précisément. A sapphire of the same cut, but paler in shade. She claimed it was an heirloom. Perhaps she told the truth. But heirlooms, like murders, sometimes pass from one hand to another by force. As he spoke, the train lurched, slowing as it neared the next station. Poirot replaced the gem carefully, locking the box once more. We shall speak with Lady Whitcomb at luncheon. Until then, not a word, Hastings. He turned toward the window, his reflection sharp in the glass. Already the pieces begin to form their pattern: perfume, telegram, jewel, and death. And somewhere, hidden between them, the murderer waits, patient as a cat upon velvet. Outside, the whistle blew again, long and low, as the Sapphire Express rolled into a tunnel. The lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, the compartment plunged into darkness. When the lamps flared again, Poirot was smiling faintly. The next act begins, he said softly, and this time Hastings, the lady, shall take the stage. Chapter 5. The widow's secret. By the time the Sapphire Express crossed into Austria, the morning sun had begun to break through the clouds,
streaking the train's windows with ribbons of gold.
The sense of dread aboard, however, only deepened. The passengers whispered of jewels, telegrams, and death. Some speculated of spies.
Others of stolen treasure.
Hercule Poirot, seated in the dining car, was the picture of serenity, hands folded, eyes half closed, as if meditating upon order itself. Lady Margaret Whitcomb entered quietly, her presence commanding attention even amid the murmurs. She was dressed in dove-grey silk, her widow's veil lifted back just enough to reveal eyes of sharp intelligence. She carried herself with a calm that bordered on defiance. Poirot rose courteously. "Madame," he said, "thank you for agreeing to see me. Sit, if you please." The motion of the train, she can make one light-headed when the mind carries heavier burdens. She sat opposite him, gloved hands resting on her lap. Monsieur Poirot, I had no choice. The conductor tells me you found something belonging to me. Indeed, Poirot replied, producing the sealed box wrapped in velvet.
A sapphire, madame.
One of rare beauty and rarer history. Her eyes did not flicker, though her lips tightened. So it was Reynard, then. He should never have brought it aboard. Poirot leaned forward slightly.
Ah, then you admit you knew him?
A pause, delicate, measured. Then softly, yes, I knew him. He was my husband's solicitor once, before the war. When my late husband died, Reynard approached me with an offer. He claimed to have knowledge of certain investments, crown assets that had vanished during the occupation. He said he could recover them, but he needed discretion. Hastings, who stood by the window, frowned.
And the sapphire?
Lady Whitcomb hesitated, her gaze drifting to the passing landscape. It was part of the payment, an heirloom belonging to my husband's family, stolen years ago during the war. Reynard claimed he could return it to me if I signed over certain documents.
I was a fool to believe him. Poirot's moustache twitched thoughtfully.
You did believe him, madame, and yet you feared him. Why? Her voice softened. Because I realized too late that he was not working alone. He was part of a circle of financiers, smugglers, perhaps even agents. They called themselves the Circle of M. That letter, Monsieur Poirot, the one you found in his case, it stands for more than a name. It stands for the organization itself. Hastings looked startled.
Then he was killed by one of them.
Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps by someone who feared what he might reveal. Lady Whitcomb's eyes flashed.
You think I killed him?
Poirot spread his hands gently.
I think you were close to him. I think he died believing he was delivering something to you.
The telegram said, "Deliver to Lady W. She alone holds the key to absolution." She looked down, visibly shaken.
He said that to me once.
Those same words. Then you knew this absolution? Poirot pressed softly. Her hands trembled just slightly.
Yes, my husband's death. It was not natural.
The papers said heart failure, but he had received a letter that day, threatening exposure. I believe Reynard wrote it. He wanted control of the Whitcomb fortune, and when my husband died, he offered me comfort. I mistook manipulation for kindness. Last night, when I saw him on this train, I wanted only to confront him, to end whatever hold he thought he had over me. She drew a slow breath. I went to his compartment at 11:30. We argued. He laughed at me. He said I'd never escape his shadow.
I left him alive, I swear it. Poirot regarded her for a long moment.
And you took nothing from his compartment? No, but when I returned to mine, I found something that chilled me. She opened her handbag and drew out a folded sheet of paper. Poirot unfolded it carefully. It was a telegram identical to Reynard's, except for one alteration. Deliver the sapphire by midnight. Failure means your death. Hastings exhaled sharply.
So someone threatened her too.
Poirot's gaze softened. It seems the murderer writes with both hands. Lady Whitcomb's composure finally faltered.
I was frightened.
I locked my door and waited for morning. When I heard the commotion, I knew Reynard was dead and that the telegram's author had fulfilled his promise. Poirot tapped the telegram lightly.
And yet, madame, there is something I do not understand.
The ink is smudged here, no? The type imperfect? This was not printed by a machine aboard the train. It was copied. Someone wished you to believe the threat was meant for you. Her voice was a whisper.
Then I was being used?
Oui, madame, said Poirot gently.
Used as an alibi.
The killer needed a woman's presence near Reynard's door. Your perfume, your argument, your fear, they make the perfect misdirection. Lady Whitcomb looked at him in stunned silence. Then who? Poirot raised a finger.
Patience, madame.
The truth, it approaches like the train, slowly at first, then all at once. At that moment, a shadow fell across the doorway. The young Russian woman, Irina Volkov, stood there, her face pale. Monsieur Poirot, she said softly, I must speak with you. Alone. Poirot rose immediately, his eyes alight. Mais bien sûr. Hastings, escort Lady Whitcomb back to her compartment. See that she rests. I shall join you shortly. When the two women had gone, Hastings turned to Poirot. What do you think she'll say? Poirot's smile was almost weary.
Something very inconvenient, mon ami.
For when the truth arrives, it often finds no seat. He glanced down once more at the sapphire, gleaming coldly beneath the lamplight. This stone, he murmured, has reflected greed, fear, and death.
But before our journey ends, it will reflect one more thing. Betrayal. Outside.
The whistle blew, long and mournful, as the Sapphire Express thundered eastward through the mountains, carrying with it secrets that glittered more dangerously than any jewel. Chapter 6. The Russian Girl's Story. Small lounge at the end of the Sapphire Express was nearly empty when Poirot entered. The curtains were half drawn against the glare of daylight on snow, and the hum of the train filled the silence like a heartbeat. Irina Volkov stood by the window, her reflection ghostly against the glass, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, closing the door behind him, "you wish to speak to me?" She turned slowly. Her eyes, dark and wide, were rimmed with sleeplessness. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot."
I've kept silent too long.
"If I do not tell someone now, I think I will go mad." "Then begin, mademoiselle," Poirot said softly, seating himself. "The truth, she is like confession to the soul."
Speak, and perhaps you will be lighter. Irina took a trembling breath.
"You think I am only a frightened girl, but I am not as innocent as I appear. The man who died, Monsieur Renard, he knew who I was. He knew my name, my real one."
Irina Volkov does not exist. Poirot inclined his head slightly. Ah, then who does, mademoiselle?
"My true name," she said, barely above a whisper, "is Irina Mirovna. My father was Colonel Mirov, once in the service of the Tsar. After the revolution, he was executed. My mother and I fled Russia with nothing. In Paris, I became useful to certain people. They called themselves the Circle of M. Poirot's eyes glimmered. Mais oui, the same name we have seen before. Go on." Irina clutched her handkerchief. "They used refugees like me, desperate, invisible. I carried letters, money, once even a jewel. They said it was all for the cause. I did not know what cause until it was too late."
Smuggling, espionage, betrayal. I was a courier for them, and Reynard was my contact. She looked down, voice shaking.
2 weeks ago he gave me an envelope.
Inside was that telegram you found.
He told me to deliver it to Lady Whitcomb in London. But when I read it, I understood. It was a threat, not a message.
I confronted him before we boarded the train. Poirot leaned forward. At the station?
She nodded. At Gare de Lyon. I told him I would not be his messenger again. He smiled and said I had no choice, that if I did not obey, someone close to me would die.
And then he mentioned the sapphire. I thought it was only a stone. I did not know it was...
What it was. Did you see him again aboard the train? Poirot asked softly. Yes, she whispered, just before midnight. I went to his compartment. I wanted to beg him to leave me out of it.
I saw the light under his door, so I knocked.
He opened it halfway. He looked frightened. He told me to go back to my room. Then I saw something behind him, a shadow, someone else inside.
A man, tall, wearing gloves. Poirot's eyes sharpened. And you recognized him?
Irina shook her head violently.
No, only the smell of tobacco. Strong foreign.
He pushed the door shut.
I ran back to my compartment.
Then I heard the cry. There was silence except for the rumble of the train. Poirot rose slowly, his expression unreadable. You have done well, mademoiselle. One more question, if you permit. You say you smell tobacco? Not cigarette, not cigar, but pipe, yes?
Her eyes widened. Yes! How did you know?
Poirot smiled faintly. Because, mademoiselle, there is only one man aboard this train who smokes a pipe. And he does so with tobacco imported from the Balkans. It clings to his clothes like a memory. Irina's voice dropped to a whisper. You mean Herr Bauer? Poirot bowed slightly. The very same. Our German industrialist who pretends to travel for commerce. but whose real business, perhaps, is war. He walked to the window, watching the snowy landscape blur past. "Oh, you see, mademoiselle, the Circle of M is not a band of smugglers. It is an enterprise built on secrets, weapons, information, power. And Reynard, I think, threatened to betray them.
That is why he died." Irina's face was pale.
And we are all in danger." Poirot turned, his gaze gentle but steady. "No, mademoiselle. The danger has passed. For now. You have done what is right. That is rare and brave. But tell me, the perfume you wear, Jasmine, it is not yours, yes?" She blinked in surprise. "No, Monsieur Poirot, it is not. It belonged to the woman who shared my compartment before Calais. She left in a hurry, and I found the bottle."
"I used a little."
"Why do you ask?" Poirot's smile deepened. "Because that small vanity, mademoiselle, has saved your life. The murderer believed you were someone else entirely." Before she could reply, the train lurched suddenly, the whistle shrieking as it slowed near a mountain tunnel. Poirot steadied her with a hand.
"Courage, mademoiselle."
"Your story will be our lantern in the dark." Moments later, Hastings entered, breathless.
"Poirot, Bowers vanished from his compartment. His luggage is gone, and so's his valet."
Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, so the serpent sheds its skin at last." He turned to Irina, bowing slightly. "Lock your door, mademoiselle. Trust no one, not even those who smile too kindly." Then to Hastings with brisk urgency. "Come, mon ami. The game is not over. It has only changed carriages." As they hurried toward the baggage car, the Sapphire Express plunged into the tunnel. The lights flickered, the darkness thick as ink, and for one breathless moment Poirot's voice rose above the thunder of the wheels. "Mark my words, Hastings, there are 2 murderers aboard this train. One kills for profit, and the other for redemption." Chapter 7. The vanishing industrialist. The Sapphire Express thundered through the Austrian Alps, the snow outside bright as glass beneath a pale noon sun. Inside, however, the air was colder still. Passengers whispered nervously, stewards scurried from car to car, and the scent of fear hung heavier than perfume. Poirot and Hastings strode swiftly toward the baggage compartment, the little detective's eyes glittering with purpose. "So, Hastings," he said, "Herr Bauer vanishes with his luggage and valet. Curious, n'est-ce pas? A man so rigid in schedule, so proud in bearing. And now, poof, gone like cigarette smoke." Hastings nodded grimly.
"He can't have gone far."
"We're sealed in. Train hasn't stopped since morning." "Exactly," said Poirot. "Therefore, my dear friend, we do not seek where he has gone, but where he remains, unseen." They reached the baggage car, where the conductor Leclerc waited, pale and sweating. "Monsieur Poirot, we have searched every cabin, even beneath the bunks."
"He is not there."
Poirot lifted a finger. "Not there, perhaps, but here." He gestured to the crates and trunks stacked high along the narrow aisle. The air was thick with the smell of coal oil and iron. Poirot examined the manifest posted on the wall, each parcel labelled meticulously, save one. A large wooden trunk stood in the corner, unmarked and recently locked with a heavy clasp. "Ah," murmured Poirot, "a trunk without a name. That is a trunk with a story." Hastings swallowed.
"You don't think—"
Poirot gave a small shrug. "Let us say I have the suspicion magnifique." He motioned to Leclerc.
"Open it." The conductor hesitated.
"Monsieur, it is not on the list. It arrived after departure, loaded by Herr Bauer's valet himself." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Then all the more reason." With trembling hands, Leclerc pried open the lid. Inside, beneath a layer of straw and canvas, lay a jumble of mechanical parts, tools, and something more terrible. The body of Herr Bauer, eyes staring, lips blue, his pipe still clutched in one rigid hand. Hastings recoiled. "Good heavens!" Poirot leaned in, his expression grave but calm. "Ah, so the wolf hides among the sheep and dies among his own wares." He inspected the corpse closely. No blood, no wounds, save a small puncture at the neck.
A needle, perhaps, or a dart, he murmured. Instant, silent.
Très professionnel, Leclerc crossed himself. And there is another killer aboard? Oui, Poirot said quietly, one who feared Bauer might speak. The question, my friends, is not who hated the man, and it is who trusted him enough to come close. He turned to Hastings.
Tell me, what do we know of his valet?
Hastings frowned. A young man, pale, quiet.
Spoke little English.
He called himself Dieter. Poirot nodded thoughtfully.
And he too has vanished?
Yes, after breakfast. Poirot's smile was thin. Then I fear our train carries yet another impostor. A servant who is no servant, a shadow among the living. He bent to examine Bauer's hand. See here, the pipe tobacco.
Strong, Balkan blend.
The same scent our Mademoiselle Irina smelled in Reynard's compartment. But if Bauer was already dead this morning, who smoked it after midnight? Hastings blinked.
You mean...
There were two men with the same tobacco, or one man who pretended to be another, said Poirot softly. The murderer borrowed Bauer's scent, his presence, his shadow, to mislead the eyes of those who saw only in passing. He straightened, smoothing his cuffs.
Become Hastings.
We must speak to Lady Whitcomb once more. It is time to learn what other business dealings she shared with our unfortunate industrialist. They returned to the main carriage. The passengers turned as they entered, curious, frightened, suspicious. Lady Whitcomb rose from her seat, her composure intact, but her colour drained. Monsieur Poirot, is it true what the conductor says? Herr Bauer is dead? Alas, madame, Poirot said gently. The rumour she has a most inconvenient accuracy. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Poirot's gaze moved slowly across the faces before him. Redding, the journalist, watching too closely, Miss Volkov pale and silent, and at the end of the car a tall figure in the uniform of a customs officer, a man none of them had noticed before. Hastings whispered, "Good Lord, where did he come from?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. Precisely the question we must ask. He approached the newcomer, who stiffened under his gaze. "Monsieur," Poirot said pleasantly, "you are attached to which station?" The man hesitated. "Vienna Customs Office." His accent betrayed him, not Austrian, but Russian. Poirot smiled faintly.
Ah, Vienna, yes.
Then you will permit me one small question. Why does a man of customs carry a Luger pistol beneath his coat? The man's eyes widened. He reached instinctively for his weapon, but Poirot's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Do not, monsieur. The safety is off. You would only shoot yourself first." There was a long, tense pause. Then the man slowly lowered his hand. Poirot stepped closer. "You are no officer. You are Dieter, yes? The valet who vanished. The assassin who silenced Bauer." The man's face hardened. "You know too much, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "It is my profession." Two attendants seized the impostor before he could move. From his pocket, Poirot withdrew a small syringe. Its needle capped, a faint trace of dark fluid still inside. "Cyanide derivative," Poirot murmured.
A death fit for a man who trafficked in weapons.
Efficient, silent, and untraceable, Hastings shook his head. "And Bauer's death was revenge?" Poirot's eyes narrowed.
Revenge, yes, but not justice.
Bauer was a courier for the circle of M. Dieter. His assassin was sent to erase him when he tried to leave them. Reynard died for the same reason. Two messengers silenced before the message could be read. He turned to the assembled passengers. "And the question that remains, mes amis, is this. Who aboard this train commands such obedience, that men kill and die at a single letter?" The carriage was silent. Then Poirot looked toward Lady Whitcomb. She met his gaze, her expression cool and inscrutable. "Tell me, madame," he said softly, "what does the M stand for? Is it merely a letter?"
Or is it, Margaret?
The widow's eyes flashed.
You dare!
Poirot raised a hand.
Not accusation, madame, observation.
"You said yourself Reynard once worked for your husband."
Perhaps he learned too much.
"Perhaps the circle was closer to your own house than you ever knew." The train jolted suddenly, the lights flickering. Poirot turned, his face grave. "We approach the border, Hastings. There will be soldiers at the station. And before we arrive, someone will make one last move. Because M, whoever they are, does not intend to be caught alive." Outside, the whistle screamed as the Sapphire Express plunged toward Vienna, its wheels sparking like fire. Inside, Poirot closed his eyes briefly, his mind whirring. 3 deaths, Hastings. 1 truth. And before the final stop, the murderer will reveal themselves, not by what they say, but by what they try to destroy. Chapter 8. The midnight confrontation night had fallen once more over the Sapphire Express. The train roared across the Danube Valley, its windows glowing like amber eyes against the dark. Inside, unease had hardened into dread. 2 men dead, 1 assassin caught, and still Poirot had given no verdict. He merely waited, polite, immaculate, and utterly still. Shortly before midnight, the train shuddered and slowed. Through the glass, Hastings saw a border station ahead, Vienna, its lamps flickering in the snow. But the great detective made no move to disembark. Instead, he rose, buttoned his coat, and said quietly, "Come, mon ami." The final curtain rises before we reach the platform. The passengers had gathered in the dining car, summoned by Poirot's precise hand. Lady Whitcomb sat rigid, her veil lowered. Irina Volkov trembled beside the window. Charles Redding scribbled furiously in his notebook, pretending calm. The captured impostor, Dieter, glared from the corner where 2 guards restrained him. Poirot stood at the head of the carriage, the lamplight catching the silver thread of his hair. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we have ridden together through death and deceit. It is time to finish our journey, not of distance, but of truth." A murmur ran through the car. Poirot continued, his voice measured and hypnotic. "Monsieur Renard was murdered for a jewel."
Herr Bauer was murdered for silence.
"And both deaths were commanded by one hand, the hand of M. But who is M?" He turned, eyes sweeping the passengers. "At first I believed M to be a man. The methods, the secrecy, they spoke of masculine vanity. Yet the clue lay not in the deaths, but in the scent that followed them. Jasmine, the perfume of persuasion. Lady Whitcomb stiffened. Poirot's gaze settled upon her. "Madame, you told me that you wore the scent of roses. That was true once. But in your compartment I found a broken vial of jasmine hidden beneath your gloves. Why would a lady hide what she does not wear unless she fears to be recognized by it?" Her voice faltered.
"You're mistaken." "No," said Poirot softly.
"When Mademoiselle Irina borrowed that perfume, she became your shadow. The assassin followed the scent and killed the wrong witness. You, madame, were the intended victim of your own accomplices." The widow's mask slipped for the first time. "You can't prove that." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Proof?"
"It sits before you." He opened the velvet box, revealing the great sapphire.
Beneath it lay a second note, fresh, unsigned, but in Lady Whitcomb's own elegant script, to the circle, payment enclosed. "Bauer and Reynard have served their purpose. Remove them before Vienna." Gasps echoed through the car. She rose suddenly, her composure shattered.
"You don't understand."
"They would have exposed me. My husband's fortune was built on their crimes."
"I only wanted to end it, to free myself."
"By silence, madam." Poirot's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. "You sought freedom through blood." "But blood, it clings." Her hand darted into her coat. Hastings shouted, "Poirot!" But too late. She drew a small revolver, trembling.
"No prison, Monsieur Poirot."
"Not for me." Poirot met her eyes without fear. "And madam, end not your life, end your shadow. Confess, and perhaps the raven of guilt will take flight." For a heartbeat, the train seemed to stop breathing. Then the gun fell from her hand, clattering to the floor. She sank into the seat, face pale as paper.
"You are right," she whispered.
"It was never the jewel that was cursed, it was me. Poirot nodded once to the guards. "Take her gently." Outside, the whistle blew as the Sapphire Express rolled into Vienna. Poirot stood by the window watching the lights approach. Hastings exhaled. "So it was Lady Whitcomb all along." Poirot smiled faintly. The lady, the jewel, the letter M, all facets of the same design. M did not stand for a name, Hastings.
It stood for money, murder, and at last, mercy. He looked back at the passengers, silent, shaken, freed at last from the grip of fear.
"You see, mon ami," he said softly, "even on a train bound for the future, we cannot escape the past. But at least tonight, order is restored." As the train hissed to a halt, Poirot lifted his hat in farewell. Snow drifted through the open doors, sparkling like fragments of the sapphire itself. The great detective smiled, turned toward the platform and murmured, "The journey ends, Hastings, but the little grey cells, they never sleep." Chapter 9. The last stop at Vienna, the Sapphire Express hissed to a halt beneath the great iron canopy of Vienna's Hauptbahnhof. Steam curled upward into the lantern light, and the platform buzzed with the low murmur of officers, officials, and curious onlookers. The long, glittering journey of the blue train had ended, and with it, the dark work that had travelled hidden within. Hercule Poirot descended the carriage steps with measured calm, his shoes polished, his coat unwrinkled, his moustache a work of perfection even after 2 sleepless nights. Hastings followed, looking weary but proud. "Well, Poirot," he said, "that's another one for the books. A killer unmasked, a criminal empire exposed, and a jewel recovered." "You've done it again," Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, mon ami, do not be so quick to close the book. The story, she may be finished, but its echoes, they linger." He turned to see Lady Whitcomb being escorted down the platform between 2 guards. Her veil had been lowered again, but her posture was no longer proud. She looked like a statue hollowed of pride. Neither villain nor victim now, merely a woman who had learned too late that truth demands its price. Poirot watched her pass, his expression unreadable. "Strange, isn't it?" Hastings murmured. "She began this as the richest woman on the train."
"And ends it with nothing." Poirot's gaze followed the departing figure.
"Non, mon ami.
Not nothing.
She still possesses what so many others lack, understanding. And that, at the end, is the rarest jewel of all." They were greeted by Inspector Keller of the Viennese police, a brisk military man who saluted Poirot smartly. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. We've received word from the French authority. The circle of M has been broken. Documents found in Bauer's cases confirm everything." Poirot inclined his head.
"Then Justice, she is on time for once."
"C'est bien." As Keller departed, Hastings turned to his friend. "There's one thing I can't quite piece together. You said last night there were 2 murderers aboard, one for profit, one for redemption. Lady Whitcomb, I understand. But who was the other?" Poirot's eyes twinkled.
"Ah, you noticed that, did you?"
"Très bien, Hastings. The second was not a killer of bodies, but of lies." Irina Volkov, Hastings blinked. "The Russian girl?" "Oui," said Poirot softly. "She killed her past."
"Do you recall her confession?"
She could have remained silent, let suspicion destroy another, but instead she risked her life to reveal the truth. A murderer takes life to hide sin. She gave truth to destroy it. "It is the same act, reversed," Hastings smiled faintly. "Trust you to find poetry in murder," Poirot chuckled. "Mon cher, everything in life is symmetry. Death and love, guilt and absolution. You see, they balance like the scales of justice, if one knows where to look." A porter approached, handing Poirot a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. "From the train, monsieur. Found in your compartment." Poirot raised an eyebrow and opened it carefully. Inside lay a single feather, either black as midnight, glossy, unmistakably deliberate. Beneath it, a card written in elegant hand for the man who restored order from chaos. The raven flies again, but now it guards rather than haunts. Poirot smiled softly.
Ah, Hastings, it seems our friend the raven follows us from case to case, a most loyal bird. Hastings laughed.
Surely that's not an omen, Poirot. Mais non, Poirot said.
Only a reminder.
Wherever men travel, be it by train, by ship, or by fate, there will always be one compartment reserved for mystery. He glanced at the Grand Station clock.
Come, Hastings.
Our work here is done. I have wired Scotland Yard. They will receive the full account by morning. But first we shall dine. Solving crimes, it is hungry work, and the little grey cells, they perform best with nourishment. They walked together through the station hall, the crowd parting instinctively for the famous detective and his loyal companion. Outside, snow fell gently over the city's rooftops, the light of Vienna gleaming like the reflection of the recovered sapphire. Bright, cold, and pure, as they climbed into a waiting cab, Hastings glanced back at the train. Steam curled once more from its engine, rising like the ghost of the night that had passed. Poirot followed his gaze and murmured quietly, "Farewell, Sapphire Express."
You have carried death, deception, and truth, and perhaps even a touch of destiny. Hastings smiled. Until the next case, then?
Poirot settled his hat precisely. Always, mon ami. For as long as men commit foolishness in the name of cleverness, Hercule Poirot will have employment. The cab drove away into the falling snow. Behind them, the whistle of the Sapphire Express sounded one last time, a low, haunting note fading into the night, and in its echo, Hercule Poirot closed his eyes, content at last, whispering to himself, "Order has been restored," and the heart of mystery beats quietly once more. Chapter 10. The Raven's Farewell. The following morning dawned clear and pale over Vienna. The snow that had fallen during the night lay like lace across the rooftops, and the great city, proud and ancient, seemed to breathe again after the storm of secrets that had passed through it. Hercule Poirot stood by the window of his small hotel suite, gazing out at the quiet street below. His breakfast tray lay untouched beside him. His mind, it seemed, was still aboard the Sapphire Express. Hastings entered, carrying 2 telegrams. "Morning, Poirot." Scotland Yard sent word. "Lady Whitcomb has confessed everything. Her accounts, her accomplices, even the name of the man who founded the Circle of M. And you were right. The organization's been dismantled across 3 countries. It's finished." Poirot smiled faintly. "Finished, mon ami?" "Perhaps in the papers, yes. But evil, you see, it does not die so conveniently. It only changes address." He took one of the telegrams, unfolded it, and read silently. Then, with a small chuckle, handed it to Hastings. It was from Irina Volkov, Monsieur Poirot. "I am safe. The Austrian police have granted me protection. I will testify. You have given me back my name and perhaps my soul. If ever the world grows kind again, I shall buy jasmine perfume once more, not to hide behind, but to remember." Hastings smiled softly. "Well, there's one happy ending at least," Poirot nodded.
Yes, she was a frightened bird once. Now she flies free. Bon! It comforts the little grey cells. They left the hotel later that morning, strolling through the cobbled streets toward the station.
Vienna was alive with music. A violinist played beneath the archway, his melody drifting like snow through the air. Poirot paused, listening, his eyes thoughtful. "Do you know, Hastings," he said, "when I was a boy in Belgium, my mother told me that truth is like melody. You can silence one instrument, but not the song. And perhaps that is all a detective truly does. He listens until the song returns." Hastings grinned. "You're growing sentimental, Poirot." Poirot smiled back. "Ah, but sentiment It is the final proof of intelligence. At the station, the Sapphire Express gleamed once more on the tracks, preparing for its westward journey back to Paris. The carriages had been cleaned, the brass polished, the tragedy wiped away, at least on the surface. Poirot stood for a moment beside the platform, his gloved hand resting lightly on the railing. "The same train," he murmured, "but never the same passengers."
"That, mon ami, is life." As he spoke, a soft sound caught his ear. A flutter above.
A raven, dark and sleek, alighted upon the station roof. It looked down at him with an almost human calm. Poirot tipped his hat. "Ah, my old friend, you followed us, hey?"
"I thought as much," Hastings laughed. "You and that bird, I'd almost believe it's your mascot." Poirot's eyes gleamed.
"Not mine, Hastings. The world's. It comes where truth has been spoken, to bear witness that deceit has been buried. The raven, it does not curse."
"It remembers." The train whistle sounded sharp and long.
Poirot turned toward it, drawing his coat close.
"Come, mon ami."
"Our next case awaits. Perhaps in London, perhaps beyond. But for now, a quiet compartment, a good seat, and a mind at rest. The great mysteries, they will find us soon enough." As they boarded, the raven took flight, circling once above the station, before vanishing into the white morning sky. Its cry was clear, cutting through the steam and noise, neither mournful nor triumphant, but eternal. Hercule Poirot glanced up, smiled faintly, and whispered, "Adieu, my friend." Until the next shadow falls, the Sapphire Express began to move, its wheels striking the rails with measured rhythm. And somewhere within that rhythm, steady, deliberate, eternal, beat the heart of order itself, guarded as ever by a small man with a magnificent moustache and the quiet, brilliant mind of Hercule Poirot. Chapter 11. The Curtain falls 2 days after the events in Vienna. Hercule Poirot sat alone in a quiet corner of Café Sachet, the morning sun glinting on the gilt mirrors and silver cutlery. The newspaper beside his coffee cup bore the bold headline, "The Circle of M exposed, Lady Whitcomb implicated in European scandal." He read it only once, then folded it neatly and set it aside. For all the noise and headlines, Poirot knew that true justice was rarely loud. It worked in silence, tidying what chaos had left behind. Hastings arrived moments later, looking cheerful. "There you are, Poirot. You'll be pleased to know Scotland Yard's telegram came through this morning. The Sapphire's been returned to its rightful owners. Under guard, of course. They're calling it the jewel that travelled through death. Rather poetic, don't you think?"